Hi guys, today I'm going to tell about table relations and how it is actually used in real-time scenarios. I have a requirement with me where I need to add a new field to an existing form, and for this requirement I am going to use the table relation knowledge. Let's see what that requirement is. So the requirement is, in the warehouse management module, there is a form on hand by location. So I'm going to have some data for this. Yeah, the requirement is to add a new field in this grid, which is called item group. And in that new field, we are going to display the item group information. So what is that item group? Item group is nothing but when you click on this item number, the information about this item number is displayed here. You see the item group of this item number is audio. So instead of clicking on this item number and then see the item group information, I directly want to have it in the grid here itself as a new column. This is the requirement. Now we will see how I'm going to display that column information here. I've created a requirement like this. The requirement is to add a new field to the form grid. So there are certain steps to follow to achieve this requirement. What are those steps? First, identify the table of the new field. Right? Let's see. Identify the table of new field. Let's see, we have a form here. Correct? So this is the new field, right? We are going to find the data source or table for this group. Just see how I'm going to do that. So on the right click on this field and then form information, click on this, then you are going to get the form information and the data source and everything here. Here the form name is EchoRes in EchoRes product information dialog. Here you can see data source, invent item, group item, right? Invent item, group item. Let's go to this form first. In the application explorer, just find that form. Designer. I've already opened here. This is the form. And then see the data source. Invent group, invent item, group item. Invent item, group item. This is the data source. With this, just clicking on Alt Enter, which shows the properties dialog, and then see the table name. Invent item, group item. This is the table name. First, we need to identify this table. This is the table name. Now I am going to SQL Server and then see. Just copy that. Select star from. I just want to see the data in here. Execute. You see here we have item group here, correct, and the item ID here. Somehow there is a relation between these two in the table, because if for each item ID we are going to have item group ID. So here we have multiple company data, that's why we are having repetitions here. But in general scenario, you won't be having any repetitions. Let's sort this out with our project data, which is US, our legal entity, which is USMF, where now you are going to get no duplicates in the item ID. So for each item ID, you are going to have a unique item group ID. So for this requirement, we finally identified the target table from where we are going to get the item group ID. That's the first part of our implementation process. Now identify the relation between the new field and the existing field in the grid. What does that mean? So where we want to add the new field? This is in this grid, right? In this grid, we want to have a relationship between, we want to find a field, any field where the item group is related to. In this case, it is clearly evident that item number is the relation we have, because with the item number only we could able to get the item group. So this, the relationship between this field and the new field we are going to add, which is item group, we have already established it, because item ID is having group ID. If we know the item ID, by writing a select query, we can get the item group. Correct? That's correct. That's it. Almost half of the work is done. Now we have this relationship between the item and item group. Now we are going to add a new field in the grid. That's simple. Just open this form. What is this form? Identify this form. Form information WHS on hand, and create an extension, because we want to add a new field. We have to create an extension for that. So WHS on hand. Go to the application explorer. Identify the form. This is application suite form. Just right click and create an extension. Create an extension. I've already did that. You can see this in the solution explorer. So we need to identify this grid. How do you do that? The control name is invent some bottom item. Just copy this and in the search box search it. I just identify the item name. Here item, this field. With this, my main motto is to identify the grid, because for this grid I am going to add a new field. That's why I took one field in the grid and I searched it so that I can find the grid. That's the motto. Once I did that, I'm going to add a new field here. So what is the data source for this grid? Properties. Data source is invent some bottom. This is it. Invent some bottom. In the invent some bottom is the data grid, and we are going to add a new string control. New string control. Just add a string. you have to click on new string control, and this has created. I just did that already. That's why we have this string control. The label I've given as item group, and name is something you can change. You have to change. So this is done. How do you add data to this? How do you add data to this new grid? This is where our earlier investigation of relation is going to help. We have established a relation between item and item group ID. We identified the table where the item group can be found, and we also have the key to retrieve that group. We have this name in the, we have this number. One second. We have this item number that can be used to fetch the item group. Yeah, we have this item number. With this, we can fetch the item group. Correct? So, we have added a new group, we have added a new field, and now we are going to fill the data into this field. How do we do that? We just have to create an extension method for this data source. We have to create an extension for this data source and write a display method. How do you do that? You just create a new class with the data source with the name containing underscore extension. I have already created that. This is the class. You can see WHS on hand form data source underscore extension. You have to keep in mind, you have to have this underscore extension, and for this class you have to mention the data source which you are going to extend. For that you have to add this attribute extension of data source form data source string. Where is that data source? In this form, WHS on hand. WHS on hand is the form, and inside this form we have this data source. For this data source we are extending. That's why we mentioned that as an attribute, and we created a class here. Now I wrote a display method. You can see I wrote a display method which returns item group, and I gave a name display item group. And for this, what I am going to get? Invent sum. Invent sum, that is the record in the grid. And now I wrote a select query like this, as I mentioned in the SQL query, because this is the table where we are going to get this information is used inside this display method. I wrote a select query here using the item ID from the grid. The item ID from the grid. Then I return the item group. Once this is done, save and build. Now go back to the table, which is this form, and go to the string control which we have added. Go to the properties. And then once we added the display method, we will see that method here, where we extended the class. We extended the data source, correct? We extended the data source, correct? Invent sum bottom. Just select the data source, invent sum bottom. Now we are going to see our display method here. It starts with the class name and This is the display method. You can see I'm just hovering it, or just extending this. 1 second. You can see this is the method we wrote. WHS on hand form data source underscore extension dot display group item ID. This is our class name dot method name. Our class name dot method name. We wrote this extension, that's why we could able to see that the whole name. This we have added this data method, then build and then see build, and then you will see the new field added here. Already did that. You can see item group is added. This is item group. Item group you could see because the label I have given as item group. This is how you will add a new field in an existing grid, and you will use the table relations here to establish the connection between the new field and the existing field and get the data. And if you want more in-depth information about this, you can join our course. Thank you.